So, how will I introduce myself to the TCG world? Well, I guess what most people would have seen in me up to this point is exactly this. This background, this face, this head, this beard, this voice. I guess if you really wanted me to, I could sit here and I could give you 15 minutes of death by PowerPoint of exactly why I'm the best candidate for this role. But this role isn't about being static. It's not about sitting still. It's about being dynamic, engaging, effervescent. When you buy a ticket to the theatre, you don't pay to see a load of actors kind of sat around reading Shakespeare, do you? True solid flesh should melt, thaw, and dissolve itself into a dew. You pay to see them bring it to life in front of your eyes. And that's exactly what I want to do with this role. So this isn't a role that should be sat behind a desk all day. It's a role that should get up on its feet. And that's exactly what I want to do here. So this is how I will introduce myself to TCG. As a real human being, somebody relatable, someone authentic. So, what training should we deliver? Big old question that really, isn't it? I think before we even kind of get there, we need to ask ourselves, where are our skills gaps? Where do they lie? Now, I know we do a big old skills test every year, big generic quiz that comes out covering about 5 disciplines, and everyone kind of fails in equal measure, and I'm not necessarily convinced that's the right approach. Looking at specific training needs analysis exercises tailored to each team. So rather than one kind of catch-all skills test that kind of comes out and tries to pick up as much as it can, as quickly as it can, is taking the time to really get to know leaders, get to know the people who make up those teams and where those gaps are. Obviously, it'll take a little bit more time, but I think if we're going to invest in our people, we're going to invest in our people. There's no point trying to find some sort of one-size-fits-all solution to what's actually a very complex and very intricate problem.
We need to start gearing our training towards a post-COVID world. Now, what this means in reality is getting as many people as humanly possible up at speed and confident using e-witness, using video technology, whether they are based in the office or whether they're based at home. What this will help us do is turn our workforce into this multi-skilled, multi-talented, dynamic, kind of total football version of themselves that'll help us respond to any requests from clients, whether that's video, telephone, face-to-face.
Given that we don't yet know exactly when we'll be able to work together face-to-face again, I'd envision that pretty much all of our training for the next 6 months will be delivered remotely, so via webinars, Google Hangouts, e-witness, all of these other lovely tools that we've got at our disposal. Well, of course, I probably could drive around everybody's house individually and start screaming the principles of insurance through the letterbox, but I don't think that would be very engaging and probably a little bit threatening. One area where I think that we really lack expertise in the Cotswold Group is in structured training for new managers. I think there's a number of people over the last year and a half who've been promoted into a leadership role, a DRM role, for example, who are given little to no actual training in terms of how to undertake the leadership aspect of their job. So what I'd propose is a structured system for anyone in a new managerial role, and potentially a lot of those in existing managerial roles, where covering off the fundamentals, the basics. What does a good one-to-one look like, for example? Or how do you do a return-to-work interview? All of these things that we might actually be guilty of taking for granted a little bit, but actually are the fundamental building blocks of that role. Of course, we can always look at the identified skills gaps, those things that we know. So, Wes, you and I have talked together about upgrading or upskilling our FIs to make them a bit more insurance savvy, if that's the term. So making sure that we can actually deliver a recommendation with our reports rather than just kind of parroting what the subject has already told us. Now, in property, we've used David McLaughlin to really good effect in bringing people over from other worlds and introduce them to the principles of property insurance as well as insurance in general. Now, David would seem like a really good vehicle to actually start this process with our FIs, obviously with checkpoints there, making sure that we are auditing reports and making sure that we're delivering on that quality service. Speaking of cross-skilling, this is going to be huge for us in 2021. Now, it's all about getting the right people in the right roles, in the right places. So, we're already starting to see some of this within the property world with the motor FIs, a few of them being cross-skilled over, which is working very well for us. But I'm not completely convinced that, for example, somebody working in surveillance knows what somebody in property does, and vice versa. So, How do we fix this? I'd like to start a regular Friday feature. I call it, What Do You Do All Day? And just something a bit of fun, bit of a irreverent kind of 5-minute interview between myself and somebody else in the business, anyone you like, any level. And the first question of each interview will always be, what do you do all day? So that way we get to see a typical day through the eyes of that person, and most importantly, what they like and enjoy about their job, and see if we can't spark a little bit of interest. Now, this is the sort of thing that we could use not just internally, but on socials, LinkedIn. If we were recruiting externally for a role, for example, then that might be the sort of stuff that could generate just a little bit of insight into a role rather than just a job description. So, my training manifesto. Tailored training needs analysis. Make us all video capable. Upgrade our FIs. Empower our new leaders. And facilitate cross-skilling. Can we just take a minute to talk about the welfare vehicle within TCG? So our wellness programme, this thing that kind of takes up absolutely everybody, all of these lovely, unique human beings within our workforce, and just gives them a bit of a safety net, make sure that they don't break down. Now, the difficulty here when you're pitching a strategy to absolutely everybody is that it can seem a bit contrived, a bit forced, a bit lip servicey. I think we need to make sure that this is coming from somewhere that's absolutely relatable to people, but without seeming like it's being kind of pushed on people from on high. We're doing it because we mean it, not because we absolutely have to do it. Is that our commitment to well-being needs to be absolutely visible at all times, but not something that's pushed in people's faces.
Are you well yet? Are you well yet?
One idea would be Wellness Wednesdays. So once a week, every week, on hump day, day that people are feeling maybe a little bit overwhelmed, is that we have one short VT or one short video, 5 minutes, just focusing on one of the key aspects of well-being. So whether that's hydration, whether that's diet, exercise, kind of through the eyes of someone who's going through this a similar experience to them. So one thing, for example, is that I have recently started picking up a bit of yoga. It's after work, get a bit of separation between work and everything else that kind of comes in life. Not something I saw myself doing particularly, and I'm just feeling a little bit of benefit from it. I'm not very good. I didn't expect to be fair. I'm nearly 40 years old. And it could be quite nice for people within the business who are maybe thinking about getting started with that, maybe a little bit embarrassed, maybe don't necessarily want to fail, think it's a little bit hippy-dippy, I don't know. Maybe seeing somebody else going through that experience might inspire them to actually start picking that up and think, well,
This guy can do it. Why can't I?
well. Also, one of my key kind of ideas for our wellness programme is the creation of a centralised hub within TCG where people can access all of our lovely sort of well-being stuff, whether it's links to external partners like Teacup or Majors Bespoke, or links to the Samaritans, any of the other kind of helpline stuff, or all of our kind of employee assistance programs. So both TCG and G4S, access to counselling, all of this lovely stuff that we offer that isn't necessarily that visible at the moment. My view is that if someone is struggling with either work or stuff outside of work, with their mental well-being, they shouldn't have to kind of sit there and dig out an email that the line manager might have sent them 6 odd months ago, or have those uncomfortable conversations, perhaps with people that they're not really that comfortable opening up to, in order to access this stuff.
I'd like to engage with our wellness partners. So people like Teacup, for example, to come in and do a spot of training with us. So we could have some general training around well-being, but also some specific training for managers about how to recognise a potential well-being situation within their teams and how they can manage that accordingly. I think I'd also like to push for a little bit of a budget just to back our own data-led initiatives. So, for example, Teacup's really, really good. We get reams and reams and reams of data from this app about exactly how our teams are feeling. So whether they feel they're drinking enough water, they're getting enough exercise, what's their diet like. If we find that the data tells us that they're not drinking enough water, then we can send them one of these, water bottle. Or if the teams feel they're not getting enough exercise, maybe we can commission a TCG step challenge, something like that. So not rocket science, but it's something to show that we're aware and that we care.
Now, when it comes to well-being and engagement, it could be seen that we've got a bit of a mountain to climb, or at the very least a very big hill. So I think it's all about dispelling some of those common myths about mental illness and well-being. So I've heard in a lot of quarters where I really shouldn't have that Depression only affects young people. If you've got anxiety, then you shouldn't be working for TCG. This well-being thing's all just a bit of a fad, really. I'd like to make those attitudes go. We need our leaders to fully engage with our well-being strategy. Simple as that sounds, but I'm not convinced that it's always happening. These guys need to be our #1 advocates when it comes to well-being, even to the point where my view, if it's not already, is that it should be written into leaders' core competencies within their goals document that comes out every year, that they have to actively engage with our well-being policy. If you've got somebody who's in a position of power and they're not fully engaged with looking after their staff or making sure that nobody breaks down, then it begs the question, should they really be a leader in this business? Controversial? Revolution? I don't know. But that's what I believe.
So my well-being plan. Be visible, but not pushy. Create a central hub. Engage with our partners. Follow the data. Make our leaders advocates. And Wellness Wednesdays.
If at the end of all of this you feel that I've earned this opportunity, just remember, you won't just be getting me. You'll be getting me. You get me.
You'll be getting me.
You get me. You get me. Thanks for watching.